Every word beyond what is necessary is a concession you did not need to make. You have felt the pull, the decision made, the position taken, the action completed, and then the silence that follows it, charged with the invisible weight of what others might think. The silence becomes unbearable, and into that silence you pour words, explanations, justifications, context, backstory, the reasoning behind the reasoning. You keep talking until the silence is filled. And in filling it, you undo something, not dramatically, not obviously, but the authority that the original position carried, the weight that the clear, unencumbered statement had softens with each additional sentence. The explanation suggests the position needed explaining, the justification implies the action required defense. The context reveals that you were aware, even as you acted, that someone might question it. By the time you have finished explaining, the position has been thoroughly undermined by the person who held it. Friedrich Nietzsche wrote about many things across his brief, volcanic intellectual career, but one theme recurs with particular intensity: the relationship between verbal economy and genuine authority. He admired the thinker who could compress an entire world of understanding into a single sentence. He was contemptuous of the philosopher who required volume to compensate for the depth they lacked. And he understood, with the precision of a man who had spent his life measuring the weight of words, that explanation is often the enemy of the thing it is trying to protect. This video is about that relationship between what you say, what you don't say, and the authority that lives in the space between them. Let's begin with the psychology of over-explanation, because the impulse is real and deserves honest examination before the critique. When you over-explain, you are almost always responding to something real. The awareness that your position might not be immediately understood, might be misread, might produce a reaction you would prefer not to face. The explanation is intended to close that gap, to ensure the understanding you need, to forestall the misreading you fear, to manage the reaction before it arrives. This intention is not foolish. Genuine miscommunication is real. Not everyone shares your context. Clarity is a genuine virtue. There are absolutely moments when explanation is exactly what the situation requires. But over-explanation is something different. It is not the explanation that closes a genuine gap in understanding. It is the explanation that tries to close a gap in approval. It is words piled on top of a clear position, not because the position is unclear, but because you are anxious about how the clear position will be received. The recipient feels this distinction. They cannot always name it, but they feel it. The over-explanation produces a faint but specific impression. This person is not confident in what they just said. They would not be explaining this urgently if they were. The explanation is not building the case for the position. It is revealing the doubt behind it. Nietzsche would name this immediately: the will to approval, operating through the words rather than the content. The need for the other person to agree, disguised as the desire to be understood. Here is the core mechanism stated as directly as Nietzsche himself would have stated it. Explanation positions you as subject to the other person's judgment. It says, "I am presenting my reasoning because your assessment of that reasoning matters to the validity of my position. I need your approval, or at least your lack of disapproval, to stand where I am standing." The unexamined assumption beneath most over-explanation is that your position requires the other person's endorsement to be real, that without their understanding, their agreement, their nod of acknowledgement, the position is somehow incomplete. Nietzsche found this assumption philosophically devastating. It is the slave morality logic applied to ordinary communication, the subordination of your own judgment to the anticipated judgment of others, performed voluntarily, often compulsively, in the name of what feels like honest communication. The genuinely sovereign person does not explain their position to secure the other person's agreement. Their position is theirs, whether or not the other person agrees. The explanation, if it comes, is offered as a gift, as additional information that may be useful, not extracted as a concession to the other person's potential disapproval. That distinction, gift versus concession, is everything. and it is felt by everyone who receives the communication, even when they cannot name what they are feeling. Let's look at what over-explanation specifically costs in each of the major domains where it operates. In professional environments, over-explanation costs credibility. The leader who makes a decision and then immediately explains it at length is communicating something about their relationship to that decision, specifically that they anticipated resistance and have already begun managing it, that the decision, in their own assessment, required defending. Decisions that require defending are decisions that are already in question. The leader who announces a decision and lets it stand, who provides context when context is genuinely needed and nothing more, is the leader whose decisions carry weight. Their words are scarce enough to be valued. Their positions are clear enough to generate real information. Their authority does not require maintenance. The leader who over-explains is already in a weaker position than they were before they began talking, not because the decision was wrong. Because the explanation communicated the very uncertainty the explanation was trying to conceal. In personal relationships, over-explanation costs intimacy in a specific and counterintuitive way. The over-explainer believes they are being transparent, sharing their reasoning, showing their work, letting the other person into the interior process. This feels like intimacy, and sometimes it is. But chronic over-explanation is something else. It is the constant provision of justification for your choices, your needs, your feelings, as if those things require a legal argument to be legitimate. As if feeling a certain way is not sufficient grounds for acknowledging the feeling, and you must also demonstrate that the feeling is reasonable by the other person's standards before allowing yourself to hold it. This pattern communicates something corrosive over time, that your inner world is not quite valid on its own terms, that its legitimacy is subject to the other person's review and approval. The relationship built on this pattern is not one of genuine equals. It is one in which the over-explainer has subtly granted the other person the role of arbiter, the one who decides whether the feelings, needs, and choices of the other are reasonable. Nietzsche would find this a profound failure of self-sovereignty, and he would note, with his characteristic directness, that the person who has granted you the role of arbiter of their inner world will eventually resent you for the role, even though they gave it to you. In intellectual and creative contexts, over-explanation has its most specific and most measurable cost. The idea that requires extensive explanation before it can be understood is an idea that has not yet found its form. The idea that arrives in a single clear sentence that creates immediate recognition, that lands before the explanation has even begun, is the idea that has been genuinely developed. That has been compressed until it contains its own clarity. That does not need the scaffolding of explanation, because the building is solid enough to stand without it. Nietzsche was a master of this. His aphorisms, the short, dense, frequently provocative formulations that fill his middle and late period work, are exercises in maximum compression. They say in 10 words what lesser thinkers required a chapter to approach. And the density is not obscurity. It is the genuine compression of deep understanding into a form that holds itself. He wrote in Beyond Good and Evil that it is not enough to possess a good wit, one must also have permission to use it, by which he meant the idea does not need apology, the thought does not need softening. The compressed, clear, demanding formulation does not need an explanation of its own difficulty. If it is genuinely right, it will find the reader who can hold it. If the reader cannot hold it, the explanation will not help. This is a more demanding position than it first appears. It requires genuine confidence in the work. And confidence in the work comes only from having genuinely done it, from having developed the understanding to the point where its expression is genuinely complete, not padded with explanation to simulate completeness. Now let's examine the specific forms over-explanation takes, because naming them makes them visible, and visible habits can be addressed. The first form is the pre-apology. I might be wrong about this, but, or, this is just my opinion. Disclaimers attached to positions before anyone has challenged them. These are intended to signal humility. They communicate uncertainty, not humble uncertainty, which is honest and sometimes appropriate. Anxious uncertainty, the uncertainty of someone who has already begun defending against a challenge that hasn't arrived yet. The strong position does not pre-apologize. It states, it holds. If challenged, it responds from the actual encounter with a genuine objection rather than the imagined encounter with a preemptively managed one. The second form is the recursive justification. You offer a reason, then a reason for the reason, then context for the context. Each layer is intended to make the previous layer more secure. Each layer actually makes the whole structure more precarious because each addition communicates that the previous addition was insufficient, and the insufficiency is the message the accumulation sends. The third form is the unsolicited elaboration. The question has been answered. The statement has been made. The position is clear. And then, because the silence feels incomplete, because the other person's face has not yet confirmed reception, because the absence of immediate agreement feels like disagreement, you keep going, past the point of usefulness, into the territory where the additional words are serving your anxiety rather than the communication. Each of these forms is recognizable, each is unnecessary, and each erodes exactly what it is trying to protect. Here is what genuine verbal economy looks like, because the critique of over-explanation is only useful if it points towards something better. The verbally economical person speaks from a position that does not require the listener's agreement to be solid. They offer their position clearly. They answer genuine questions with genuine answers. They acknowledge legitimate uncertainty where it genuinely exists, not to manage potential disapproval, but because honest acknowledgement of uncertainty is itself a form of clarity. They do not fill silences with supplementary justification. They allow the silence to do its work, to give the listener time to process, to allow the position to land fully before the next word arrives. They are comfortable in the pause because the pause does not threaten the position. The position is complete without the additional words. Nietzsche described this quality in his admiration for what he called the grand style, the mode of expression that accomplishes more with less, that contains its own authority, that does not require the approval of the audience to remain standing. The grand style is not cold or withholding. It is warm in its very economy because it respects the listener enough to give them the genuine thing without the padding. Let's look at the historical figure who embodied this principle most completely, because the principle is visible in the life of someone who practiced it under maximum pressure. Abraham Lincoln, again, but not for the same reason as in the silent script. Lincoln's Gettysburg Address is the most famous example of verbal economy in the entire canon of American public speech. 2 minutes, 272 words. Delivered following a 2-hour oration by Edward Everett that was considered the featured address of the occasion. Everett's speech was magnificent by the standards of the time. It was thorough, eloquent, historically detailed, emotionally calibrated. It explained everything. It justified everything. It left no point unexplored. Lincoln's address did not explain. It did not justify. It arrived at the core of the occasion, the meaning of the sacrifice, the obligation of the living to the dead, the unfinished work of the nation, with a directness that bypassed all justification and landed immediately in the place where justification would have only diluted what was said. Everett wrote to Lincoln afterward, "I should be glad if I could flatter myself that I came as near to the central idea of the occasion in 2 hours as you did in 2 minutes. The over-explanation came first. The thing worth remembering came second. And it was half the length of what preceded it, combined with everything that would have followed, precisely because it explained nothing and said everything." Let's be honest about what makes over-explanation so difficult to address, because the difficulty is real and deserves acknowledgement. The impulse to over-explain is often indistinguishable from the inside, from the impulse to be genuinely honest and genuinely clear. Both feel like attempts to communicate fully. Both emerge from a desire for real understanding, and the line between them is not always visible in the moment of speaking. The practical test is this: are these additional words serving the listener's understanding, or your own comfort? Are they clarifying something that was genuinely unclear, or managing something that might never materialize? Are they completing the thought, or padding the silence that made you anxious? If the words are serving the listener, they are not over-explanation. They are explanation appropriate, useful, genuinely communicative. If they are serving your anxiety about the listener's response, they are over-explanation. And the cost of confusing the two, over time, is the slow erosion of the authority that genuine clarity delivered, without apology, without recursion, without the anxious filling of space naturally carries. Nietzsche wanted clarity. He wanted the genuine, compressed, demanding statement of genuine understanding. He was not against explanation. He was against the explanation that was actually a plea. Here is the practice, simple enough to begin immediately, demanding enough to take genuine time to develop. Before you continue speaking past your natural stopping point, ask one question. Is this next sentence serving the communication or serving my comfort? If the answer is comfort, stop. Let the silence be there. Let the position stand without the additional sentence that was going to soften it, qualify it, or justify it to an audience that had not yet asked for justification. This will be uncomfortable. The silence will feel like disapproval before any disapproval has arrived. The incomplete explanation will feel like vulnerability before any vulnerability has been exploited. These feelings are real. They are also the exact feelings that, when responded to with more words, produce the over-explanation that erodes the position. Sit with the discomfort. Let the silence tell you something about whether the position actually needed the additional words. Almost always, it will tell you it didn't. Over time, this practice develops something that cannot be faked and cannot be rushed. The internal sense that your positions are complete without external validation. That the silence, after a clear statement, is not a vacuum to be filled but a space the statement has already occupied. That the listener's processing time is not a threat to the position but the evidence that the position has landed with enough weight to require processing. Nietzsche's own writing is the best illustration of this practice applied at scale. He did not explain his aphorisms. He did not follow the compressed statement with a paragraph unpacking it for readers who might have missed the point. He offered the formulation and trusted that the reader who was ready for it would find it, and that the reader who was not ready for it would not be helped by the elaboration. This was not arrogance. It was a genuine philosophical position about the relationship between writer and reader, that the best writing creates the conditions for understanding rather than managing the reader into a predetermined conclusion, that the text which trusts itself produces a different quality of encounter than the text which explains itself to death. His influence has been enormous, not despite the compression, but because of it. Because readers across 150 years have found in those compressed, demanding sentences something that required their own genuine engagement to understand, something that gave back more than it initially appeared to contain, something that could not have been received the same way if Nietzsche had explained it until nothing was left to discover. The over-explained idea is the idea that leaves no room for the reader's intelligence. The compressed, trusted idea is the one that invites it. And invited intelligence is the intelligence that becomes genuinely influenced, not told what to think, but given something worth thinking about and trusted to do it. So here is what you carry from this. The next time you feel the pull to add one more sentence to the position you have already clearly stated, to soften it, to justify it, to explain it to an audience that has not yet indicated they need the explanation, notice the pull, name it for what it is. The will to approval, seeking resolution through additional words, and then choose. Not every time at first, but more often than before. The choice to let the position stand, to trust that what was genuinely said does not require the scaffolding of what follows, to allow the silence its proper weight, not as a void to be filled, but as the space in which the statement is received. Nietzsche compressed an entire philosophical system into aphorisms that still generate genuine thought a century and a half later. Not because he wrote more, because he wrote only what the understanding genuinely required, and trusted the rest to the reader. Your position is complete. Your decision is made. Your thought has been expressed. Let it be enough. The silence that follows is not a problem. It is the proof that something worth holding landed with sufficient weight to require holding.